All right, so today we're going deep on the Manhattan Project.
Oh,
We've got excerpts from the American History Tellers podcast,
okay.
and specifically an episode called Devastating Success. And let
Yeah.
me tell you, this thing is, it's packed with stories you won't believe.
Yeah, it really is one of those historical turning points, right? Where innovation and consequence
Right.
are just
Thanks.
totally intertwined.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Yeah.
We're talking motivations for creating the atomic bomb,
Mm-hmm.
the major players,
Mm-hmm.
the ramifications of that decision.
Right.
I mean, where else are you going to hear about scientists
Yeah.
using a dental drill on a plutonium bomb?
Well, that was George Kichikowski, and it was a much more complex situation than just grabbing a drill. I mean, the plutonium bomb's explosive lenses were incredibly sensitive.
Here, hold on, back up. Explosive lenses. What are those?
So to trigger a nuclear explosion, you need to create a perfectly symmetrical implosion. So these lenses are made of high explosives, and they're arranged around the plutonium core.
Right.
And when they're detonated simultaneously, they create a shock wave that compresses the plutonium
Okay.
and initiates the chain reaction.
So Kichikovsky was basically trying to fine-tune this crazy system
Yeah,
using a dental drill.
pretty much.
That sounds insanely risky.
It was incredibly risky. Any misstep could have set off a premature detonation.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he was working with volatile materials under immense pressure.
I can't even imagine.
The weight of the entire war effort resting on his shoulders.
That kind of pressure would make anyone reach for the antacids.
Right.
But the pressure wasn't just about the technical side of things, right? There was this huge moral dilemma, too.
Absolutely. I mean, many scientists involved were deeply conflicted.
Sure.
You know, Leo Szilard, who initially pushed for the project,
Yeah.
he even drafted a petition with Albert Einstein urging President Truman to demonstrate the bomb's power before using it on a populated area. They believed a show of force might be enough to convince Japan to surrender.
It sounds like they were really trying to find a way to avoid
Mm-hmm.
the horrific consequences that were possible.
Yeah, they knew what they were dealing with,
Yeah.
and they were trying to find a way to prevent the worst-case scenario.
But I imagine not everyone agreed with that.
You're right.
Yeah.
Edward Teller, for example,
Okay.
he was a strong advocate for using the bomb.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he believed it was the only way to end the war quickly
Hmm.
and ultimately save lives.
So even within the project itself, there was this clash
Mm-hmm.
of opinions
But absolutely.
about what they were creating.
Yes, these were brilliant minds struggling with a question that had never been asked before. How do you control a power that could potentially destroy the world?
That's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And amidst all this debate and uncertainty,
Yeah,
they went ahead with the Trinity test.
they did.
Uh,
Yes. They chose this incredibly remote location in New Mexico,
okay.
the Jornada del Muerto.
What does that mean?
It translates to journey of death.
Oh, wow.
Pretty ominous, right?
Yeah. Talk about setting the scene.
Yeah.
And even getting to the test itself was almost derailed by weather, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Right.
There was this huge thunderstorm threatening the test site.
Oh, no.
Jack Hubbard, the meteorologist,
Yes.
was under immense pressure to predict when it would clear.
I bet.
General Groves, who was in charge of the whole project, was notoriously demanding.
Oh, I've heard the stories.
Apparently, he even threatened Hubbard if his forecast was wrong.
Oh, my gosh. Wow, that adds a whole other layer of tension to the situation.
Absolutely.
We all know how unpredictable weather can be, but with stakes this high,
Right.
what could have happened if the test had been conducted in bad weather?
A lot of things could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
Radioactive fallout could have spread far beyond the test site,
Right.
potentially contaminating populated areas.
Oh, wow.
The blast itself might have been affected too. It was a huge gamble
Yeah.
with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. So they held their breath, waited for the storm to pass, and finally on July 16th, 1945, at 5:49 a.m.,
Mm-hmm.
they detonated the first atomic bomb.
It was a moment that changed history forever. Witnesses described a blinding flash,
Wow.
followed by this intense heat wave and a shock wave that knocked them off their feet.
Oh my gosh.
And the mushroom cloud rose miles into the sky.
Wow.
A stark visual of the power they had unleashed.
And just like that, the world entered a new era, the atomic age. But I guess that's a story for part 2 of our deep dive.
Indeed.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back.
So last time we left off with that Trinity test, that first atomic detonation.
Yeah.
What a turning point in history.
It really was, and the impact of that test was immediate, especially for the people within the project itself.
Yeah, I bet.
You have to remember, even with all the calculations and the theoretical work, no one had ever actually witnessed the destructive power of an atomic bomb.
Yeah, that's true.
It was all on paper until that point.
So what was the reaction like among the scientists?
It was a mixed bag, awe and apprehension.
Right.
Some, like Oppenheimer, really started having serious doubts about what they had created.
Right.
They realized that this wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a weapon capable of unimaginable destruction.
I can only imagine. Seeing that detonation must have been a very sobering experience.
It was.
So where did things go from there? I know Truman was really eager to use the bomb to end the war with Japan.
He was. He saw it as a way to force a quick surrender and save American lives.
Right.
And he also informed Stalin about the bomb at the Potsdam Conference,
Really?
partially to intimidate him as the Cold War was starting to heat up.
Did Stalin even flinch?
Not really. Soviet spies had already infiltrated the Manhattan Project.
What?
Yeah, including a physicist named Klaus Fuchs, who was working at Los Alamos, so they knew about the bomb before Truman even told him.
That's wild. So even as the war in Europe was ending, this new conflict was already simmering.
Yeah, the seeds were sown.
So what happened with Japan? Did Truman give them a chance to surrender before dropping the bomb?
He did. After the Trinity test, Truman issued an ultimatum to Japan demanding their unconditional surrender.
Okay.
He warned them of prompt and utter destruction if they refused.
And they didn't back down.
Japan's prime minister at the time seemed to just ignore the warning.
Wow.
He insisted on continuing the fight. Whether he really understood what prompt and utter destruction meant, who knows?
Right.
But that decision sealed their fate.
So the stage was set for Hiroshima.
It was.
This is where things get really heavy.
It does. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay took off from Tinian Island carrying a uranium bomb, nicknamed Little Boy.
And their target was Hiroshima, a city full of civilians.
Yes. At 8:15 a.m. local time, Little Boy detonated about 1,900 feet above the city.
I've read accounts from survivors.
Yeah.
It's just horrific.
It's unimaginable. The force of the explosion was equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT.
The podcast episode mentions a history professor who was in Hiroshima when the bomb hit.
Yeah, his account is just heartbreaking.
He described seeing a flash of light, feeling this intense heat, and then this deafening roar.
He went searching for his family in the aftermath, only to find his city reduced to rubble.
Oh my God.
He described Hiroshima as a flat desert of debris and smoke.
It's hard to even fathom that level of destruction.
Over 2/3 of Hiroshima's buildings were destroyed. Tens of thousands of people were killed instantly, and countless others suffered from burns, radiation sickness, and long-term health problems.
That's just a tragedy. So did Truman issue another warning after Hiroshima?
He did, but Japan still refused to surrender unconditionally. So 3 days later, on August 9th, another B-29 dropped a plutonium bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, on Nagasaki.
Another city, another unimaginable tragedy?
Nagasaki was a major port and industrial center. The bomb was similar in design to the one tested in New Mexico.
Right.
It caused widespread destruction and loss of life.
All of this is just so heavy, knowing the magnitude of what happened.
The estimated total death toll from both bombings, including those who died later from radiation sickness, is over 200,000 people.
It's just a staggering number.
It is. And 6 days after Nagasaki, Japan finally surrendered, ending World War II.
So the Manhattan Project achieved its goal, but at a horrific cost.
Yeah, a devastating success, as the podcast called it.
So where do we go from here? What was the aftermath like?
Well, the world was in shock. People were trying to grasp the reality that humanity now possessed the power to destroy itself.
Right.
Even though the war was over, a new conflict was brewing, the Cold War. The Soviets successfully tested their own atomic bomb in 1949,
Really?
intensifying the arms race and raising the very real threat of nuclear annihilation.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think that the same project that ended World War II also laid the groundwork for decades of nuclear tension and fear.
It's a complicated legacy.
It is, and it's not just about the bombs themselves. The Manhattan Project also left a huge mark on science and technology. I mean, many of the discoveries and innovations had far-reaching applications in fields like medicine, energy, and even computing.
Right. It's hard to imagine our world today without the advancements that came out of the Manhattan Project.
That's right. But it's also crucial to remember the human cost of those advancements.
It is.
The stories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of scientific progress without ethical considerations.
Yeah, we have to remember that.
So the Manhattan Project wasn't just about winning a war. It was about the dawn of a new era, one defined by both incredible potential and terrifying risk.
Absolutely. It raised questions that we are still grappling with today.
Yeah.
What are the limits of scientific inquiry? Who controls the most powerful technologies? And how do we prevent their misuse?
I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
And I think we need a moment to process the weight of it all. We've been talking about the Manhattan Project, and
Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the scale of it all.
It's huge.
We've gone from this race against time to build this weapon
Right.
to the consequences of using it.
Yeah,
It's a lot to process.
absolutely. And as we shift our focus to the legacy of the Manhattan Project,
Okay.
I think it's important to acknowledge that interplay of scientific achievement,
Right.
moral dilemmas, and the long-term consequences.
It's not a simple story with easy answers,
It's not.
but that's what makes it so important to understand.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin to unpack the legacy of something like this?
Well, I think we can start by looking at how it fundamentally changed the global landscape.
Right.
I mean, the world before Hiroshima and the world after
Right.
were just irrevocably different.
Yeah.
The development of atomic weapons ushered in the nuclear age with
Right.
all its complexities and anxieties.
It's like humanity crossed this threshold,
Yeah.
this point of no return.
Mhm.
We suddenly had the power to destroy ourselves.
Right.
And that knowledge has shaped so much of what's happened since.
Absolutely. The Manhattan Project didn't just end World War II.
Right.
It ignited the Cold War,
Yeah.
this decades-long standoff between the U.S. and the Soviet Union,
Right.
each armed with enough nuclear weapons to obliterate the planet multiple times over.
It's almost surreal to think about.
It is.
The entire world lived under this shadow of potential annihilation for decades.
It's a heavy thought.
And even though the Cold War officially ended in the early 90s,
Right.
that threat of nuclear proliferation hasn't gone away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right. We still live in a world where nuclear weapons exist.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But the legacy isn't just about bombs and geopolitical tensions, is it?
It's not.
The Manhattan Project also had a significant impact on scientific and technological development.
Oh, absolutely. In many ways, the Manhattan Project was a catalyst for scientific innovation.
Yeah.
It brought together some of the brightest minds in physics, chemistry, engineering, mathematics,
Right.
and pushed them to solve problems that had never been tackled before.
And those breakthroughs, those innovations,
They didn't just stay confined to weapons development, did they?
no, they didn't. They had this ripple effect across many different fields.
Like what?
Well, nuclear power, for example, emerged directly from the research conducted during the Manhattan Project.
Okay.
And while it remains controversial because of concerns about safety and waste disposal, nuclear power provides a significant portion of the world's electricity today.
And I remember reading about how advancements in medical imaging,
Yes.
like PT scans and radiation therapy, were also influenced by research that came out of the Manhattan Project.
That's right. Techniques for producing and handling radioactive isotopes,
Okay.
which were developed to create nuclear weapons,
Yeah.
ended up having applications in medicine,
Wow.
helping to diagnose and treat diseases.
That's pretty amazing. It's a strange paradox, isn't it?
It is.
This project, born out of war,
Oh, right.
focused on creating a weapon of mass destruction,
Yeah.
ended up having these unintended but beneficial consequences. It's a complex legacy full of contradictions and unintended outcomes.
So I think it speaks to the broader question of scientific responsibility.
It does.
The Manhattan Project forced scientists, and really all of humanity,
Right.
to confront the ethical implications of scientific discovery.
Yeah.
It made us ask, just because we can do something, should we?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one that we're still wrestling with today.
Yeah.
As technology advances at an unprecedented pace.
Right.
I mean, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, all of these fields hold incredible promise
Yeah.
for improving our lives, but they also come with potential risks
Right.
that we need to consider very carefully.
It's like the Manhattan Project gave us a glimpse into the future.
It did.
A future where our own ingenuity could either save us or destroy us.
And it's up to us as a society to figure out how to navigate that future responsibly.
Well said. It's been a heavy but incredibly insightful journey exploring the Manhattan Project. It's one of those historical events that continues to resonate, to challenge our assumptions about progress, power, and responsibility.
I couldn't agree more. And I hope that anyone listening to this deep dive
Yeah.
will walk away with a deeper understanding of this complex and often uncomfortable chapter of history.
Thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep the conversations going.